Have you ever wondered just how strange our reality really is? We see the world, sense time, and feel like separate beings, and we take all of this for granted. We easily talk about dreams, illusions, and hallucinations. But we almost never ask ourselves the main question: how did we even know that reality is what we see? Today, we'll explore the levels of reality that each of us lives in every second of our lives without even realizing it. Reality is a figment of your imagination. Who among us hasn't woken up in a cold sweat, thinking, "Thank goodness it was a dream"? The neurochemical impulses that accumulate during dreams, fantasies, or hallucinations are indistinguishable from those that originate in our heads when we experience all of this in reality. So, if our perceptions deceive us, how do we know what's real and what's not? Let's start, perhaps, with the simplest and most superficial level of reality, which is called ordinary life. Here, you wake up every morning, check your phone, get ready for work or school, and outside the window, people rush about their business. In this layer of reality, everything seems incredibly simple and understandable. You live among things that simply exist and function as they do. Every object is in its place, and the world itself functions exactly as you're accustomed to observing it. When you look at objects, the thought that they could be anything else never occurs to you. This reality raises no questions or doubts in us, and we simply accept it as a given. In other words, we live with a sense of stability and predictability. If I see this car, it exists, and that's it. There are no other options. At this level, we live as if everything around us is real, even though the only reason we're even sure this world exists is because of our senses. And yet, these same senses are terribly unreliable and deceptive. There are countless optical illusions that trick our vision and make us see, feel, and hear things that aren't really there. Our imaginations make us see ships floating in the clouds, and a rubber hand makes us feel pain when we hit it, even though our real hand is completely safe. So, in essence, this reality isn't an objective truth, but a collective hallucination that we all see by default. The sky isn't blue because it's blue, but because we've agreed to see it that way, and that's how most people see it. And to understand what's really going on, we need to dig one level deeper. You're most likely watching this video on your phone or computer. Inside each of them, complex processes of electricity, binary code, and billions of operations per second are happening right now. However, you don't need to interact with that code or understand how your phone works to watch this video. You see an interface only in the form of a screen, buttons, and icons that make it as easy as possible to use. Without such an interface, any device would turn into a bunch of binary code with a bunch of ones and zeros, completely eliminating the possibility of interaction between computers and humans. It would probably still function internally and even be capable of performing various operations. But to you, it becomes a useless stone, running a bunch of incomprehensible processes. Even without the most basic interface, humans would never be able to control such devices the way we do right now. Well, the brain presumably works in exactly the same way. It never shows us true reality as waves of various frequencies, signals, and energy. Instead, it creates a user interface that has been honed by evolution solely for survival, and it is precisely this interface that we call colors, smells, sounds, and even the sense of time. For example, everything we see as colors is simply electromagnetic waves of varying wavelengths, and our eyes can only detect a tiny fraction of this entire spectrum, approximately 380 to 780 nanometers. Everything else is invisible to us. Ultraviolet, infrared, X-rays, and radio waves. All of this exists, but just because we can't see it doesn't mean it doesn't exist. For example, some species of frogs and snakes can perceive infrared light and thermal radiation. It is here that we begin to realize for the first time that reality isn't as real as it first appears. The horror of this level is that absolutely every person lives in a projection of the brain, constructed specifically for you, and all observable reality is actually far more complex than we imagine. At the next level, reality ceases to be physical and becomes something that all of humanity has collectively believed. We have constructed a vast world of meaning that has the power to control us more powerfully than any physical law. Take money, for example. Physically, it's just a piece of paper or a number on the screen of your bank's app. But once billions of people agreed that it had some value, those pieces of paper immediately began to determine where you'd live, what food you'd eat, and even how long you'd live. Receiving money activates the same part of the brain that responds to sex, gambling, and illegal substances. That is, it evokes real chemical pleasure. The effect of money on a person is so powerful that it can influence our biology. Another illusion: if you look at Earth from space, you won't see country borders. Just one relatively small planet where everything is one. But we've created invisible lines and checkpoints that determine how much you'll live, whether you'll have security, rights, and freedom of speech, even human morality, such as a sense of right and wrong, is often built on cultural foundations. In one culture, murder may be a sacred ritual, while in another, it's a punishable crime. We continue and will continue to obey these unspoken laws, as they have become a fully fledged part of our existence. The main problem with this reality is that it rests solely on human interpretation. This world is anchored by nothing but our own beliefs. What is sacred truth for one group of people may seem absurd or threatening to another, and as soon as one set of meanings clashes with another, wars and conflicts immediately begin, leading to the deaths of thousands of innocent people. And this is how this imaginary world becomes a fully fledged physical reality. If you look at all matter more closely, it becomes obvious that its solidity is simply a sensation. The floor you're standing on, or the phone you're holding right now, all of these appear solid, but if you zoom in enough, you can see that almost all of these objects are literally made of nothing. An atom isn't just a small ball that everything else is made of. It's a cloud of probability surrounding a nearly empty nucleus. If an atom could be scaled up to the size of a football stadium, its nucleus would be the size of a small grain of rice, and its electrons would be like flies hovering somewhere in the back rows of the stands. All the other space between them is simply empty space. The sensation of solidity arises only because the atoms repel each other electromagnetically, preventing you from passing through objects. At the atomic level, particles don't obey the usual rules of the macrocosm. They behave very strangely and unpredictably. They are almost never located at specific points, but exist solely as waves of probability, and only at the moment of interaction with something, for example, another particle or object, does that particle choose its state. It's as if reality itself doesn't form until something else collides with it. At this level, reality transforms into a paradoxical structure of equations and probabilities, where even our usual sensations, common sense, and logic no longer apply. Quantum mechanics shows that this world is far more complex than simply our everyday interactions with objects and people. It sets rules at the most fundamental levels of reality for absolutely everything that exists in this world. For thousands of years, different cultures have spoken of things that modern science is only now beginning to grasp. Regardless of cultural traditions, the essence of these messages has always been the same. The observable universe and the material world are simply a shell thrown over something far more integral and incomprehensible to our minds. People in deep meditative states and drug addicts exploring their consciousness with mushrooms often report a feeling of dissolving into a deeper layer of existence. They describe this reality as something that completely collapses all boundaries between themselves and the rest of the world, something akin to the unity and interconnectedness of all that exists. Sometimes they speak of multidimensional realities, geometric landscapes, and immaterial entities. Interestingly, these descriptions are repeated by absolutely everyone, even though they are completely unrelated. Under psychedelics, the brain's default mode network, which is responsible for our observer senses, which we directly call consciousness, is switched off, and the brain begins to operate outside the confines of its standard filters. In other words, the brain transcends its default settings and begins to display a different perception. The question arises, if our brain is even capable of such tricks, then can our everyday reality be real? As I said at the beginning, our reality is merely a mutual agreement that the sky is blue, a chair is hard, and water is wet. But if each of us lived in an altered state of consciousness, then we would call objective reality precisely what people see while high on mushrooms or meditating. If an alternative state of consciousness is felt by many to be more real than our everyday reality, then which of these can we confidently call reality? At this point, all models of perception, all beliefs, and all theories you've believed in collapse. Reality is not something that can be studied from the outside, but something that each of us is at every moment in time.
So this episode has come to an end. If you liked the episode, give it a like, write comments, and click the bell to be first to know about the next episodes.